Hi, welcome to some frequently asked questions about POVA. I'll do my best to answer some of the questions we get all the time and maybe give a better foundation to what is POVA and what is it good for. And because POVA stands for Point of View Analytics, which basically means it analyzes and creates analytics of data from different points of view. Why is it important? Because when you have a lot of data, billions of records, you can't really get insights from so many lines of transactions or whatever you're looking at. So one of the ways to do it is to dissect it by different segments, different pivots, and look at every segment or every slice into the data as independent data set. And then after you analyze it, compare it to other slices of the data, trying to see how things match up both on their own individual characteristics and when you contrast them to others. So it's not a real-time system. It's not something that runs for a couple of minutes and gives you a result, but it's something that can run for hours, sometimes many hours, and creates a very, very comprehensive database uh, of different calculations. And then it takes these calculations and tries to create some kind of a narrative or a story. But what kind of narrative or story can connect the different anomalies, the different calculation results, and different things discovered to actually explain what are the breaking points, what are the places where things don't make sense, what are the places that look abnormal even though they look normal. So it's like they look out of place, like something there is not right. And POVA is not a black box because it can trace exactly which algorithms, which analysis caused, and it even projects things into the future and try to ask if things continue as they are right now, where the dependencies are going to get even stronger. What are some ring uh, relationships between vendors or events or something is going to even more solidify or maybe even go and become deeper into the organization. So POVA scans your entire data set. It can be one very complex table or a bunch of different ERP tables, and it will tell you things that you cannot see just by analyzing the lines as they are, because it lets you isolate and look at every specific angle and then combine it together to a coherent story. So it's a very, very unique tool. And for some cases, I think it gives you insights that are almost impossible to get any other way. This is the reason why we created POVA. All the organizations that we're working with, they're all medium to large organizations. They have all the different dashboards and tools and analytics and BI and AI engineers. Why do they still need POVA? Because POVA does something that's very different than what organizations usually do. And it does it very, very well. So instead of creating a whole team and trying to build these kinds of analysis, deep analysis on their own, they can take a ready-made product that can run a lot of different analysis and knows how to interpret them and have experience interpreting them, what they mean to your operations. So this is in short what is POVA. Now, well, people often ask, what is good data for POVA? What data is can be used to significantly get important insights from for a company that they can't really do with other tools. So if you take just, for example, a list of transactions and you run POVA to find anomalies, or you run some other anomaly detection tools, the result might be, very similar, because there's only so much you can do with a single list of items. You can cluster them, you can look for anomalies, you can look at how things happen across time and seasonality and a lot of these kinds of things. But as data becomes more complex, for example, you have more categories and more linked data tables and more patterns where different entities relate to other entities and different events relate to other events, or things co-happen together or in the same geography or in the same cluster of products or other entities, then POVA shines because POVA has quite a few algorithms that look for these specific combinations of when things happen together. So for these kinds of datasets, POVA is really invaluable. Uh, if you look at different roles inside the company, you ask yourself, who can most benefit from POVA? So first of all, the owner of the business. If it's a medium or a large private business, lots of times the owner is directing the strategy. He's not always hands-on in all the execution. And sometimes it's good once every quarter, for example, to have a deep dive analysis and see that the organization is actually behaving in the way he thinks it is. Uh, it's as close as you can get to activity-based costing and know exactly like on which customers you're making money, where you're losing money, which processes are broken, which where there's a regime change in terms of like users of vendors and partners, for example, and really lets you understand the dynamics of the business, where things become more complex, more fragile, where the slope of different growth or decline changes. Really helps you understand maybe there is places where assets are misappropriated or things seems to disappear. And it's not just numbers like, yeah, we lost inventory worth X millions of dollars, but to pinpoint exactly when it happens and what are the circumstances. So even if you cannot blame something specific, at least if there are crimes and the same person is in the crime scene always, maybe it's good to go and have a word with them. Maybe something is there that is just happens too often, or statistically, it's a question that is good asking. So yeah, owner of the business really wants to be close and understand what's going on, and also sometimes for a CEO to know where's the biggest gaps in his understanding or in the data. What are the like black boxes in the business that he doesn't really understand how they operate or what's the risks there or what's the dependencies, so you can better understand that. You can look at also audit teams. Auditors, they usually look back and try to analyze how are our control working. uh, are we really doing the right things? Are we doing real things right? And of course, with a lot of regulated businesses, you have also the compliance teams and they have all their policies, and you have to comply not just with your internal policies, but also with external, sometimes markets, sometimes regulation from government, sometimes from different different bodies or standards. And it's better for you to know if you have issues with compliance before it blows up out of proportion, and the damage can be immense. And when something is small, there's a small drift, you can fix it, you can put better controls, and you can better manage compliance. Uh, Now, POVA is also great for operations. So if you have somebody responsible for operations and they really want to see where are the places that we operate very, very well, and maybe to copy these processes and use them on less performing areas, or where are the areas that are performing well, but because we put so much attention there, we neglected something else, and it's going to bite us. So you can see that as well. Or where are the areas that we have problems? Where are the areas where the controls are not strong enough? Where there are signs of fatigue in organizations. People start to be sloppy, copy pasting stuff, repeating a lot of different things, not really putting the effort to make a unique event from every event. A lot of repeating things. It's good to know about it. And also put it in perspective. Maybe 5% or 1% of events have an issue, but if a lot of them are the same people, then it's worth to maybe go through training or talk to them or really to see how to resolve this. Because as I said, in many cases, there are very few people that that hold the key to a lot of issues. And once you resolve that, the whole organization becomes much healthier. Um, which industries are most attractive for using POVA? A lot of times it's either very regulated industries where you have to really comply with a lot of regulations, or maybe it's a group of companies, like in medical, for example, or pharma, that some of them are manufacturing, there are warehouses, there are clinical trials, there are research and marketing, for example. And because they all need to comply, they all have to show that everything is great all the time. And it's not always clear where are the gray areas where they're like half smiling. Maybe, something is not that good, but they don't want to talk about it, not to create a problem. So analyzing the data flow in the group can help understand where the weak points are, where things are not maybe as smooth as they appear to be. Maybe data is not trustworthy, maybe more synthetic data than actual real data. Also, when buying data from third parties, are you making decisions and creating data products based on the good data or not? These are questions that can be answered with POVA relatively easily. So it's either very regulated industry, or the other side is industries when there is a lot of mess. You have a lot of partners, a lot of vendors, a lot of branches. Things are very chaotic, change a lot. There's no specific people who are in charge of specific things. It's very opportunistic, very, let's say, bidding interfaces, marketing, shipping, uh, a lot of things that are very easy to lose track of. And there's a lot of money changing hands. And it's not always clear if somebody is really in control of the process, or the process is in control, and just moving everything else. Like, is the dog wagging the tail, or the tail is wagging the dog? So in these kinds of organizations, POVA can actually bring much more structure and help understand what is working, what is breaking, and put a lot more sense into operations. So yeah, it has to be at least like a medium to large business to have enough complexity that POVA really brings an economy of scale improvement. Because when you have an Excel with 10,000 lines, you can look at it and pivot it and investigate it. And a lot of the things you can figure out if you have experience, you'll figure out on your own. But if you have 1 billion lines a day, or 100 million lines a day created, it doesn't matter how much experience you have, you will never be able to go through the entire data set. And looking for creative ways to pivot the data is just like that. There are millions of pivots you can do into the data, and nobody has time to really run through all these pivots. So this is where a system like POVA that systematically goes through every possible pivot into the data and runs the stack of sometimes more than 100 algorithms into every slice to only answer one question: is it an interesting slice? Is it an interesting slice on its own? And is it an interesting slice compared to other slices? And uh, once a slice of data is interesting, then you'll be suggested to see it. If it's interesting from different directions, then it's like a prime candidate for looking into it. And if just from one angle, then it might be good enough to look at. And that's where also POVA can put things into perspective, because we actually tell POVA before the run, what is it running? If it's running a supermarket data set, or like a nonprofit or government, and the results are going to be the same of the analysis, but interpretation of the analysis is going to be different. Something that is totally acceptable for a startup can be very problematic for a municipality, for example. So the results are always the same. It's deterministic, it's algorithm statistics. And so, for example, an algorithm will always return like a blood test values, like return 5.4, for example. But is 5.4 high or low? Is it good or bad? That will be determined according to the profile of the scan, which means which kind of organization it is, what is probably expected from the DNA of this kind of organization. Something I like to say is like, if you have a DNA of a fish, it's good. It could be a DNA of a healthy fish. That's not a problem. The only problem is if you find it inside a cat. So even if the values are not an anomaly by themselves, but the arrangement and tempo and the way the processes are run mimics a different kind of entity inside the inside your entity, then it might be a problem. I'm not saying it's for sure, fraud or a big issue, but it's a question worth asking because the answer is very different. Why would why would somebody work with 10 customers in a very specific way and the 11th customer is so different? There needs to be a reason for that. And unless we find the answer, it's a question that we might want to ask the tell the customer it's worth asking, and he might want to ask that person or do some investigative work. But at least he doesn't have to guess where to dig. So that's already very, very powerful. If we talk about some alternative to POVA, currently there are three bad choices, both looking at auditing and fraud detection and operational efficiency. There are three bad options, and POVA is supposed to be not just the fourth option, but sometimes a better option. And the reason is right now the main options are either to sample. So we have billions of lines and you're just sampling few of them to try to get some statistically viable way of understanding the data, but you're not looking for statistical representation of the data. You're looking for the noise, looking for the anomalies, and that you will not get with sampling. Sampling only gives you the baseline, the most accurate statistical baseline. Another method is just to take some known manipulation or known issues or known problems and try to look for them in your data. Try to look for these known signatures. But these things evolve all the time, and with LLMs and with AI, it gets more sophisticated. Also gets different. The signatures are different. So especially if you're dealing with internal agents in your organization that they know how you're testing the system. They know what dashboards you're looking at. They know what you're looking out for. So they'll make sure that your dashboards look fine. So you will not see it, and you will not. You might catch the same invoice, with the same number being like somebody submitted them like 10 times. Yeah, you can notice that with a lot of different tools, or there are different things that you can predetermine, but overall, that's not the method of how fraud get caught. That's not the method of how organizations really get improved. Most fraud get caught by whistleblowers. Just when it spirals so out of control that everybody sees it and then somebody speaks. And that's usually like a year and a half too late. Trust by customers, by partners, by investors, and it's really hard to manage it after it bursts. And it's always better to discover it much earlier and then do what you think needs to be done and not be forced into action. So the third way, the first was sampling. The second was looking for specific profiles of actions, of sequences. The third one is maybe the riskiest of all is basically like a machine learning or AI kind of solutions that they also tell you, we take all your data and we analyze it, but then it's a black box and they give you like maybe 50,000 lines of anomalies. And they don't tell you why, because they don't know why. They created some kind of a clustering mechanism that identified that these lines are an anomaly. But you can realistically go and just randomly test 50,000 lines without knowing why you're testing them out of context. You will actually not find anything. It's just creating a very complex report that you can't do anything with it. And actually, from a legal point of view, that's one of the worst tools you can use, because you will have a list of actors, for example, but you won't be able to do anything about it. And then a year and a half later, when everything explodes, you'll figure out that one one of the actors on the list maybe was indeed the fraud that you caught, or that the whistleblower is talking about, or whatever. And they'll tell you you had him on the list for the entire time. Why didn't you do anything? But yeah, you had everybody on the list, so you couldn't do anything. There was no proof, there was no trail, there was nothing. Just marked some event marked as suspicious, but with no supporting evidence and with no way to validate it. Yeah, it's even worse than not saying anything because now you have liability. So yeah, so POVA does scan everything and it gives you an audit trail of why something is flagged. So you can actually even go to Excel and do a pivot and take that slice of the data and you can look at it. You can say, you know what? I understand. Yeah, it does look strange. Let's look at it. Or you can say, no, actually in our industry, it's fine. It's expected. It's this kind of customer. It's very different than the others. It's understandable. Okay, so this is not an issue. When you go to the next issue. Uh, When would you want to do a POVA scan? Like I said before, it's not something you do every day. A scan can take between hours to days, or even sometimes a week or two, because it runs a lot of calculations for a lot of different business slices. So I would suggest an organization do a POVA scan once a quarter, just to make sure everything is aligned and nothing is like starting to grow. Maybe on one scan period, there was something that was a bit small and it wasn't like a high priority. But then in the next quarter, you start seeing it growing more, and then it will become a concern. So at least you have some lead time to see what's going on there. If there's a regime change and you're a new manager or new CEO or new CFO or COO, definitely do a scan, know what's going on there. If you're buying a business or about to sell a business, I would definitely do a POVA scan. You don't want skeletons, you don't want surprises, especially when you're going to M&A or going to other process. If you're going into some regulated workflow of certifying or testing your certification, then definitely you want to do a scan and have a list of all the issues you might want to look at before an audit all comes, and maybe surfaces something that you didn't know about, and now it becomes a big cost and a big issue that you have to resolve very fast and analyze all the records very fast. So it lets you be in control of your business. Uh, if you're if you're an investment firm that invests in businesses, uh, and you want to know from time to time that everything runs smoothly, so definitely as a board of directors, or you can ask for uh, like a board committee or audit team to do like a scan even once a year or once every 6 months or once a quarter, and just have it as a risk mitigation. If you're an insurance company, you might ask for POVA scan, not to get the actual list of issues, but just to get some kind of an assurance that the business is operating within a reasonable way. Another way you can do a scan is not just for yourself, but you can do a scan for potential vendors, for example. Even if you're a government or you're a municipality or just a big business player, you can ask potential vendor to give you, let's say, a list of last 3 years of transactions or something, some data, and you can look at that data, you can analyze it, and then if you see there is a problem, you can reject the vendor. You can tell them, you know what, we don't know exactly what's wrong with your business, but it's flagged all our sensors as problematic, and we just prefer not to work with you. So it's like an immediate audit with the conclusion, and you don't have to make a personal choice and decide, and then maybe in a year or two you regret it because there were things that maybe felt funny, but you couldn't really put your finger on it. So that gives you like a much better validation. Are you looking at real numbers? Are you looking at numbers that naturally occurred, that actually this is the story of what happened, or did somebody just sit in Starbucks and wrote that list of numbers for you and massage them enough to look good? So this is important. Or for example, let's say you're a bank or another kind of this kind of entity, and you have tens of thousands of business accounts, and you might want to scan their transactions to see if one of them has a problem in the way that they're operating. And then when you have to give them credit, or if you would give them consulting, you can tell them, look, there is an issue with your data. We don't know what you're doing exactly, but something is unnatural happening. There's some manipulative actions happening in your data. Maybe it's good for you to look at it. And after you do, and if we run a scan again in 6 months, and we see that it's clear for that amount of time, then we can maybe give you credit or do something like that. Definitely, if you have a forensic accounting firm, or if you're doing investigations, or trying to uncover something much deeper, then definitely, yeah, you can use POVA.